Welcome to the Leadercast podcast, a weekly deep dive into the stories that transformed our guests into leaders worth following. I'm your host, Joe Boyd. If you've been enjoying the podcast, thank you so much for being a listener. One simple thing you can do to help us out is give a review wherever you listen. Today's guest is Maricella Herrera. She is the CEO of the Ellevate Network, which gives women plus, and she'll explain what that is, the opportunity to come together, to network, and to get actionable advice on where they're going in their careers. She has an astounding, amazing background story coming from El Salvador to Mexico and then to the US. You're going to love everything about this. Very inspiring. And if you stay to the very end, you will find out where the best tacos in Manhattan are. So you got to stay around. Maricella, welcome to the Leadercast podcast. We're so excited to have you today.
Thanks for having me. So happy to be here.
You are the CEO of Ellevate. I think a relatively new position for you, correct? But you've been there a while.
Yeah, I've been with the company 10 years, but I was appointed CEO last June. So it's only been a few months.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Does that come with like lots of excitement and a little bit of trepidation? That's usually what happens to me when I get a new opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, it was a little bit nerve-wracking when I made the decision to take the role. In one hand, I know the business inside and out because I've been there so long. But on the other hand, all eyes are on me. So it definitely was a little nerve-wracking, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity. No. It's a place I love, and if I can help shape it, then I will.
Well, that's awesome. We want to know a little bit of your backstory and everything, but before, could you tell us, I know a little bit about Ellevate because my company that I started, a creative agency, we did some video work for the Cincinnati chapter several years ago.
Ooh.
But a lot of folks may not know much about it. So could you just tell us what Ellevate is and why you love it?
Yeah. So Ellevate is the largest community for women plus at work. And back in the day, we were used to say, it was a community for women. This is 20-something years off when we started.
Yeah.
And times have changed. So we have really leaned into the women plus aspect, which is we know that we can't fight for gender equity if we don't have women, non-binary individuals, and men all fighting for the same thing. We have... Basically, what we do is we try to create safe spaces where women mostly can get together, talk about work, the good, the bad, the ugly, how things are going, give each other advice, feel seen, and go back to work with the confidence that they can rise up to whatever it is they want to do, however they define success. We've been doing it for a long time. And the reason I love it is because, A, I get to meet incredible people. B, there's a warmth to this community. There's this kind of common denominator of the people within the network that are smart, are ambitious, are really go-getters.
Yeah.
They're also kind and want to help each other and want to be there for each other. And the whole point behind it is, can we get more women? Can we get more minorities into leadership positions? Because if we can do that, then I believe we can change the culture of business, which right now is not the most human-centric or friendly. So that's what we try to do.
Well, awesome. And I'm glad we found you. I think our passion is very similar to that here at Leadercast. Our next big event is called Human Intelligence. And I think I'm similar to you. I've been leading this company for 2 years, and it's a 21-year-old company. So you kind of inherit things. And just like you said, it was an opportunity I couldn't pass up either. It's such a great opportunity to help people in the world. But I wanted to make sure we help leaders be leaders in the most human way possible. And so I think we're on the same team, which I'm very excited to hear your story more. So could you take us back? I know you're not weren't originally born here in the U.S. Can you just tell us a little bit about how you grew up and maybe what your earliest sort of things that excited you or your early ambitions as a kid? Would just kind of learn what kind of kid you were.
Ooh. So I'm from El Salvador and grew up there. So I spent the first 18 years of my life in a small war-torn country, just to put it very bluntly. It was I still love it. I still go back every time I can. My family is there. And I think it was an interesting way of growing up for many reasons, right? Like one, since, I was born, there was already armed conflict going on there.
Yeah.
And for the first about 10 years of my life, that was like happening within our country. So I do remember, waking up at the sound of a bomb or, feeling insecure in a way that I've never felt again.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I thought I went through all the usual phases. I was going to be a veterinarian because I loved animals, or a marine biologist. I was like obsessed with Jacques Cousteau. There was always one like underlying thing, which was I wanted to save the world in some way, shape, or form.
Sure.
And I remember as I was actually thinking about this not so long ago. I mean, I was like a kid, and I would make these like little posters of like save the planet, and then try to put them up wherever I could. And I don't know. I don't know why that was. I think because I've always thought that and also there's an aspect of my upbringing that I grew up Buddhist, which is also pretty rare for El Salvador.
Yeah.
And that aspect of like, we all have a responsibility for what the world is and how things shape up. And it's not just handed to you, but you have to build it and make it and to what you want, was always there. So that was, I would say, some of my first things. I also always wanted to be a writer. I loved writing. I am an avid reader and was an avid reader since I was a very young. I remember going through all of the Nancy Drew books there were.
Yeah.
And she was my idol. So I don't know. Something about strong female leaders was there from the beginning.
I have like 5 follow-up questions. I'm trying to pick which one I want to go down. I'm a religion major, so I'm a little interested in how were your parents Buddhist? Like that, it is kind of a not an area of the world you would think you would become Buddhist yet. So how did that happen?
So my mom has always been super interested in different religions. So she didn't go to college, which is one of the reasons why I keep striving to do as much as I can. She always instilled to me to do what she didn't.
Yeah.
But she was not the content housewife. So she just started studying comparative religions.
Yeah.
And I was pretty young. And I've always been very thankful to how they brought me up, because in El Salvador, everyone's like Catholic. That's kind of the thing, right?
Yeah,
That's their common denominator. And I definitely was the type of kid who would go to church on Sundays and did her first Holy Communion. But at the same time, I was being exposed to all of these other world thoughts and views and spiritual beliefs with the aim. And my mom did tell me, like, look, my job is to show you what's out there and for you to decide what you want to believe in.
Yeah.
And Buddhism just made sense to me. She started leading the Buddhist center in El Salvador at some point. And so I was this 12-year-old kid who was going to Buddhist retreats and doing all this stuff. And it just kind of made sense with I'm not really good with people telling me believe this just because you have to believe it.
Right.
And the axiom of, believe things, try them out and see it if they make sense and then go from there, was much more present for me in Buddhism.
It's just fascinating to me, and I hadn't expected our conversation to go this way, but I don't identify as Buddhist, but I studied it, and the stuff around suffering is very helpful to me, and accepting suffering as part of life. And I think I did not grow up. I grew up to avoid it at all costs and ignore it when I could. So it's interesting to me that you're growing up in a war-torn place of suffering and being taught that. I don't know what language you would use around it, but to sort of live with it, right? To have peace with it.
It's part of I know it in Spanish, but it's part of the life cycle, right? Like
Yeah.
it's part of being able, it's like the waves in the ocean, right? It's just, it comes and goes, and it's what's deeper that matters. And nothing, not even the biggest joy nor the worst suffering is permanent. So that for me, I think the thought of impermanence and the thought of karma, those two for me had been the ones that marked my life the most.
Fascinating. And this is not, I also have an improv comedy background, just so you know. So I accidentally constantly turn this podcast into either improv or religion. So
improv,
we should talk about leadership at some point.
I'm trying to take some improv classes. I'm a runner, and I currently have 3 broken toes, so I can't run.
Oh, wow.
And long story. And so I'm like, what can I do with my free time right now? And I'm like, I was thinking of taking some improv.
You should definitely do it. You're in New York City. You got options. Yeah. All right. So let's get back to your story and your leadership journey. I know you. Did you go to Mexico before you ended up in the U.S. Did I see that? Okay.
I did. I slowly trailed north.
Was that for studies? Is that why you went there? Okay.
I went there for college. So one thing with El Salvador is most people who can have the privilege of being able to leave for their studies do.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough that I had the opportunity. And I decided to go to Mexico because it's one of the top schools in Latin America, but it was the first time I was going to be on my own. So I didn't want something that was completely different.
Yep.
So I was there for around 8 years. So I went to college there and then started my career in Mexico in real estate banking, which is completely different from what I do now.
Yeah. And then what led to the journey to the States?
Studying again.
Yeah.
So I left my banking back in my banking career back in Mexico to come to do my MBA in New York.
Okay.
So moved here for that and to see where, with the idea of I'm going back into finance, I'm like, this is what I'm doing. This is why I'm going to Colombia, because that's where I'm really going to become super successful in this like cutthroat finance world. That was that for me.
So one of the things we talk about here is kind of the hero's journey that everyone goes on. And usually it starts with some sort of calling or call to adventure, right? And often it is a calling that's disguised where you think it's something, but it's really something else. So I'm curious whether it was when you decided to go to Mexico or decided to come here, what did you feel like you were being called into? What was the adventure you were invited into, and how did it shift, if it did?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I would say going to Mexico was kind of like going with the flow, right? Like I knew I needed to do something and study, and I went to Mexico. Plus I was 18. If I know something now is that when I was 18, I knew absolutely nothing.
Right.
So when I decided to come to New York, that I had, a few years of my career under my belt. It's a little bit more mature still.
Yeah.
Knew nothing really, but
you always feel like you know nothing when you think of yourself 10 years ago, no matter what age you are.
Right.
That's how right. Yeah.
I think, and when I think about it this way, I was called to be this, I thought of success in a different way. It wasn't a big calling of, I want to go change the world. Like I felt like I had when I was a kid.
Yeah.
By that point, I feel like I had been brainwashed to, I want to make money.
Yeah.
And that was kind of top of mind. It was, I want to go to New York and be this successful person that people look up to, that's like built this career. I would always joke that in many ways in Latin America, parents save for their daughter's wedding. And my parents had always saved for like her grad school degree.
Right. Yeah.
Because that was more my thing. Like my thing was, I want to do something big and want to have a name for myself and be successful. And success in those moments for me was kind of more on the how much money am I making realm. Which is really weird to think about now after so many years.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you think money was sort of just a way to keep score, to kind of know you were winning?
Yeah. I could see that. I also come from a very entrepreneurial family. So my dad is is to this day a workaholic and family business in El Salvador. And I knew I did not want to do that.
Yeah.
I was like, I'd rather have a good relationship with my family than work with them. My brother is a very successful entrepreneur, and it just felt like I needed to do that too. It couldn't just be the men in my family. Like I had to do something. And yeah, I think it might have been a way to keep score.
Do you have a defining moment when you started thinking differently about your career?
So, when I was in business school and deciding what I was going to do next, I definitely was trying to go into finance, go into banking. I thought that that's what I wanted to do, right? I wanted to stay in that industry, but in New York, which is not a fit for me. Like now that I see it, I'm like, really? But at that point, I was just super laser focused on that. And it took a while of really grueling rejection.
Okay. Yeah.
For me to start trying to open my eyes. And I had the luck really of meeting Janet Hansen, who's the founder of Ellevate. Back in the day, it was called 85 Broads. And she became kind of a mentor. We talked. There was moments in my search for what I was going to do next that I was very, very stuck, and was also having really bad experiences with interviews. Everything from getting asked if I was going to get married in the next 2 years to just like being told to, quiet.
Yeah.
So I kind of ended up taking this role more in this role at Ellevate more as in let's try this out. In the bottom of my heart, I had already started taking some social enterprise classes. I was like very interested in how can business actually have an impact in the world. When I was in Mexico doing banking, even though I was doing banking, I was actually focused on low income housing development. So there was something there that was always like in deep down.
Yeah.
I'd say though, the first few years at Ellevate, I still had that mindset. And I think my mindset started shifting when I realized I was having an impact on people, just one-on-one. And that gave me much more satisfaction than anything else.
It's so fascinating just talking about people's lives this way that it always comes back to what the little girl wanted, Like when I hear you saying like, oh, I'm starting to change the world. That's what I knew I wanted. And we all go through it. We all get a little distracted, I think, and the universe or God or however we think about it has a way of pulling us back to what we were called to originally. Just it's exciting. Yeah. It's exciting to hear that story. Yeah.
And I do believe a lot in, the universe has its ways. I say when I was applying to business school, I applied to bunch of places, and I got New York or New York. I was like, okay, we'll go to New York.
Right.
And when I was looking for a job, I kept being rejected for something that then this door opens, and it takes me a while to open my eyes and realize that there's a reason behind it and fully let myself embody it. And then it makes sense. Then I'm, happy.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned your mentor and the founder of Ellevate. What was her name? I'm sorry.
Janet Hansen.
Janet. So one of the things that we think about is when a mentor enters your life in like story theory, right? Mm-hmm. And this is that they have a way of being like a mirror to yourself. To what they're really showing you is what you had all along. When I say things like that, did you see Janet sort of pulling out of you what you already had and you just couldn't see or weren't aware of? Does that analogy make sense?
It does. And funnily enough, I was with her just yesterday. So talking about Liz, and we were with a couple of other members of my leadership team, and she was talking about when we first met. And as you're saying this, like, and thinking about it, for me, Janet was one of the first women to be promoted to sales management in Goldman Sachs back in the 90s. So she had this very successful finance career behind her, which was, what I aspired to when I was younger, and then had used all of her influence to create something that was going to be helpful for other people. And she was smart, full of crazy ideas, and not afraid to put them out there. And I, on the other hand, was smart, full of crazy ideas, and kept quiet.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, I could see how having that influence was so important for me.
Do you find having a relationship like hers, I'm sure you've had other mentors as well, but that does it give you sort of a lens to see folks that you can mentor as you go through your career? Do you find yourself reversing the role these days?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would say my first mentor, who was my boss back in city, like back in Mexico, where I was in banking. Um, he, I think, has been one of the most influential people in my life. He fought to hire me because no one wanted to hire me because I was a foreigner and that was too much work.
Mm-hmm.
He helped me with so many things, and he made me realize just how much of an influence you can have on people. And I think I've tried, he was very upfront and very direct, and I've tried to do the same thing with the people I work with. And with Janet, I wasn't directly working with her at that point, although, I ended up working with her. I definitely find myself, particularly with my team, I have a lot of very young people in my team, or had. We used to have interns. They've all kind of grown up with the company. I mean, our average tenure is 7 years. Yeah. So, yeah.
That's a lot these days.
All of these people are people that I've tried to help out and try to mentor. And some of them have left, and I still, have dinner with them every time I can. I like the idea of helping someone find not just a successful career or a successful path, but one that's going to be fulfilling for them.
Yeah.
More than anything else. Yeah.
I talk about this some, and I try to play around with it as, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life and had folks work for me and get really close to them, help them grow up, and then they get a dream job. And the instinct is sort of like, oh man.
Oh yeah.
But it pretty quickly for me, if I'm having a good day especially, it can switch to kind of happy for them and pride. And I think the best leaders I've ever had sort of saw themselves as career coaches for me. Mm-hmm. And the very best ones were sort of like not even thinking about this organization that I was in, but felt like almost a higher level of mentorship or leadership to say, like, I would love to work with you forever because I see something in you, but probably not. So let's just prepare you for what's next. Yeah. I see that in what you're saying.
I subscribe to the radical candor theory, right? Like care deeply about them, which I do normally. Be very honest and transparent with them, which I try to be. And I always try to think of how are you preparing them for, it's true, right? Like I wish they were here for the rest of their career, but I know it's not going to happen. Yeah. Nor would I want, and to be honest, I wouldn't want them to, because they would get bored. Yeah. And if I've hired correctly, I've hired people with ambition and people who want to do something bigger than what they're doing right now. And preparing them for that is a big part of the job. I do think that as a manager, you're a coach more than anything else. Yeah. And the biggest thing, and I tell them this still to this day to the people that have left, and we're still close, and I still check on them, and they still ask me for references, or I still refer them for jobs. Right. And I always think about it this way: at some point, maybe I'm not going to be at Ellevate. At some point, I might be starting my own thing, and I want to build my bus. It doesn't matter where the bus is going to go. I want it to be filled with good people. And so these are people that are on my bus. These are people that if at some point I get the chance to work with them again, I will absolutely take it.
I love that. I'm going to steal that.
Go for it.
Yeah. Just don't say it in a board meeting, maybe. But that's if we all get the opportunity to get really old, we'll think back about our relationships more than our jobs.
Right.
And I think we can lose sight of that in the middle of building a career. And even if it's not starting a new business and a new career, that you want that bus to be filled up for the folks that you care about. And
yeah, you want good people around you.
Yeah.
In whatever way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome. I don't want to end without asking you just a little bit more about how folks can get involved with Ellevate. I think there are like chapters around the country or world. So could you kind of explain how folks could be involved? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to elevatenetwork.com, you can sign up for membership. We have chapters around the world, mostly in the US, but we do have some in Dubai, Madrid, a couple of other places. And they host local meetups. It's a great place if you're like itching to connect with people after many years of being in isolation.
Yeah.
Our chapters are hosting in-person stuff, virtual stuff. And we do at Ellevate have lots of programming that is virtual, that is actually meant to meet other people. So it's not just of like go and hear someone talk at you. It is come and meet some people who might fit in your bus.
Nice. Way to pull it all together. And women plus means men are totally invited, correct?
Men are totally
Yes.
invited.
Okay, good. I'll check it out then.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So last most important question. You live in Manhattan, USA. Where should I go for the most authentic cuisine that reminds you of home? Do you have a place?
There's a good Salvadorian place, and there are several good Salvadorian places in Queens. So if you're looking for Salvadorian food, gotta go to Queens.
All right.
If you're looking for Mexican tacos, the best tacos are ironically in Times Square.
What?
So
Taco Bell? No.
No, absolutely not. That's not tacos. They're called tacos numero uno.
There you go. Awesome. That might be the most important thing some people learned today. But this was such a pleasure. You are now officially part of the Leadercast family, whether you like it or not. Thank you so much for being here, being on our platform. I'm sure folks will find you and probably reach out to you and be a part of Ellevate. It was just such a pleasure to meet you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.